Welcome to Paint Along at the Plainfield-Guilford Township Public Library. In this program today, we're going to go step by step painting along through a landscape painting. And it's such a great time of year to do a landscape painting. Oh my goodness, the color that is in the fields right now is just so much fun to do. So we're going to just jump right into it. I'm starting on a 5x8 or actually an 8x10 canvas. You want to start small. You don't want to start really big, especially if you're kind of new to painting. And this program will be really great for beginners because I'm going to explain everything as we go. So again, this is a toned canvas, and what that means is I've just taken some of my acrylic paint and with the color that I wanted to use underneath, and I've just brushed it on the paint. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can see some places are darker and then others, but what this will actually do for your painting is little bits of this warm color will just kind of break through and peek through the other layers of paint. And so that's going to give your painting depth. So that's the first step that we're going to do in starting our painting. All right, so the first thing when we are painting, we want to have a really great material or a reference photo. Now for our use today, I took a really great photo of a field right here in Hendricks County. So what we will do is step by step, we're going to take a really good look at this photo. The biggest part of our painting is really going to be the arranging the various objects in the painting, because what we want to do is we want to lead your eye through the painting, around the painting, so there's movement in the painting and it takes your eye. All the great painters use composition, and that's what that is. It's just arranging the objects in your painting to move your eye around the painting where the artist wants you to go. So, but it's also another use to use expression in the painting as well. So to get started with that, I have this really great image, and as we're doing that, I'm going to show you a really great image here. And at this point where this image is, you can actually do just save that photo, and you have my permission to use it. So here we are. You can see it's a really wonderful fall scene. Now with the composition, moving our eye around the painting, there's some really great things that I like about this one. And I've got another one here that I want to show you. I'm going to do a little marking on this so you get an eye for what I'm talking about. You can see there's a really dark line here and here. This serves as a really great purpose. It basically moves your eye from this point to this point. This little spot in the trees is going to be our focal point. That's going to be the kind of area that's really going to hold your eye the longest. Now, if you're doing a painting of an animal, your animal is automatically going to be the focal point. If you're doing a painting that has people in it, an image of anything that's living is going to automatically be your focal point. But in this instance, in a landscape, it's going to be this little area of trees where we have our lightest lights of the sky and our darkest darks of the tree trunks. That's going to be the area that has the most contrast, so it's going to hold your eye there. So we're taking our eye up to the focal point. Another thing about the focal point, you don't want it to be smack dab right in the center of your painting. You want your focal point generally to be something in an area called the golden mean, if you will. If you do a little bit of research on that, you may have heard of that before. And so what it basically boils down to is your focal point's going to be best if it's in a corner, any of these spots. It's really going to be more pleasing. And this one just naturally lends itself to being in this lower right-hand corner. So now, as we're looking at this scene, you can see that there is a dark line at the base of the trees. Again, that draws your eye. And then here, we have this really interesting spot where there's a dark and a light. And what that's going to do is it basically makes your eye move around the painting up to the top of the trees. Again, this is all with this line of again, a difference in value. We have a light value of the sky and a darker value of the trees. And then, in reality, if you look at this cloud, you even see a line in the clouds, which is amazing. So taking that right up here into the clouds, you see you have this wonderful zigzag that's happening in this painting. And then it just kind of brings your eye right back around. So, with this beautiful zigzag, this is actually called an S-shape composition. So, I've got a couple of examples of some really famous painters using an S-shape composition. Here you'll find, this one is Mountain Vista by Edgar Payne. It's got a lot of blue in it, but I think you'll be able to follow me in that. Your eye is taken up along this ridge of trees, up along the edge. You can see the lightest light and the darkest dark. This is our focal point, this ridge of the mountain. And it takes you up. And then it takes you up on this ridge of the mountain where your eye is, because of this dark and light, your eye actually comes right back down. So it has this beautiful S movement right here in this painting. Again, an S-shaped composition. I've got another one, a real quick one here. This one is by Alfred Sisley. It's called The Flood on the Road to Saint Germain, okay? So, but this is another good example of an S-shaped composition. You have this line of the grass meeting the water. You've got your focal point here in a man on a boat, and then the lines just take you right back up into the tree, and the tree brings you right back down. You've got this beautiful S-shaped composition that moves your eye around the painting. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. Now let's get started painting. As you can see, my palette, I always use primary colors. So I've got white, and I've got yellow, red, and blue. So to begin, I'm going to start with a darker color. I like to usually mix up a purple. Today I'm going to be using a bright. This is the workhorse of my painting. This is a size 10, actually, a size 10 bright, and you can tell it's a bright. It has a shorter brush length, and so it doesn't have quite as much spring, but it has a lot of, anyway, it has spring in it, and it has a straight across edge. So let's get started. So to begin, I'm going to just basically put some lines, and I'm going to sketch in some shapes on my painting, and I'm going to begin by making purple. Now, if you have, if you're not quite sure and you'd like to know more about the materials I'm using, you can actually refer back to one of our other videos that talks about our materials list and why I'm using various things that I'm using. But so I have a very simple color wheel, and there are some that are very complex. This one is just very simple. It's especially good for beginners. If you've never mixed paint before, our primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. These are all around the color wheel. And then to get, for instance, the color that we're going to be using, I want to do kind of a purple. So I'm going to mix red and blue to get purple. And so that's how you can kind of tell. So to get that, I'm pulling a little bit of blue down here, and I'm going to pull in some red till I get this really beautiful purple. I like using that to kind of put my sketch in. I'm doing just a quick sketch, this is another thing. It's great to have a sketchbook because you can kind of learn to do some drawing. Drawing's kind of the foundation of painting, so I highly recommend you get a sketchbook and just try your hand at it a little bit. Okay, so the first thing that I want to look at on this painting, you can see that our horizon line here is about a little bit less than a third of the way up the painting. So I'm just going to make kind of a little sketch right here. This is going to be my horizon line. Doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it's probably better if it's not exactly perfect. Okay, and then about, let's say, another third. I'm going to give it just a little bit more because in painting, the shapes that you use are much more interesting if you can vary them and you don't have everything exactly alike. So your painting is going to be much more, if I divided this exactly in thirds, it wouldn't be quite as interesting as if I vary it a bit. So I'm going to bring it kind of up here for this tree line. You can see it kind of goes up. And then you can see this tree line actually comes down quite a bit, so I'm only going to go about 1/3 of the way here. So there we are. So now I'm just going to kind of shape. I see some circular shapes. Doesn't have to be precisely what I see on the painting. I do, however, want to make sure I do have some open space right here, again, helping to lead my eye. So I'm going to kind of make that and then put one more tree up a little bit higher. There we are. I'm going to open that up a bit. All right. There's my purple. All right. So another thing now that we're going to look at with shapes. Here in the foreground, we have this shape like this. This wonderful area where we have these really deep darks. Again, that's going to lead our eye into this ditch. So I'm going to just basically put that in here. I have kind of a shape like that coming in. That's kind of a triangle. And then here we're coming all the way across and down. And this is the area where I've got that really beautiful big dark area. I don't want to lose that. That's really important to the painting. That's the first thing that's going to grab our eye, that deep dark tone right there in the foreground. So I'm going to make sure I get that in there. Beautiful. All right, that's exactly what I want. One thing I just noticed on this tree, there's a great little spot here of light where the sky is showing through. And so that's going to help make this not quite so massive. So I'm going to cut that in right here. Doesn't have to be exactly like that, but I really like it. Okay. Now we've got some other really wonderful places. This is our focal point, this area right here of these trees. So I want to make sure that we have that kind of opened up. When you're doing tree trunks, you don't want them evenly spaced. You don't want them like little toothpicks standing at attention. We want to vary them. We want to have maybe a couple next to each other. Give it a space, maybe have a bigger one. So that's one of the things. You don't want your trees to be standing in a row like soldiers. They need to be varied and interesting. So I'm just going to kind of sketch them in so I don't forget that. All right, and here we've got more tree trunks that are showing in this space where it's kind of open. Okay. And then many, many more lots. There's a lot of light down in here coming through. So we want to make sure that we have that. So one of the things I forgot to mention at the very beginning was that after you take that photo, if at any time you want to see the finished painting, you can just jump ahead to the very end of the painting and we'll show you the finished product. So maybe you want to jump ahead and just kind of get a feeling for where we're going, and then you can always come back and look at the rest of this at your leisure. And feel free to hit stop anytime that you need to do that as well, just to catch up. All right, so let's get back to it. All right. So there's that, and now there's some really beautiful shapes in the sky. I really liked that line that it brought that had this one right here. And later I'm going to look at that. There's a lot of pink in this one as well, which really will add to that fall feeling. Okay, there we are. So I have kind of a good sketch of where I intend to go with this painting, but one of the things I really want to do at this point, again, we're setting the foundation for our painting. The rest of the details will come later and very quickly, but the foundation, the basic shapes that we're using, and the values. Value is the lightness or the darkness of an object. So a high value is something very light, like the sky. The sky is going to be our lightest value, or our deepest, darkest values are going to be that ditch and some of the areas of the trees. So this is the important part where we're actually creating interesting shapes using the values of this painting, lightness and darkness in our shapes. That's the part that's really important going forward. So let's take a look at these interesting shapes we have. We have this really beautiful, interesting shape down here in this ditch. All right, don't want to lose that. We have some really interesting areas, some really dark darks. Need to go more in the direction of purple here. I've got a lot of blue, which I love blue. Blue is fine too. All right. So this is a really cloudy day. If it were a bright sunny day, the light might be coming from a particular direction. I think that it's really kind of hard to tell. It looks to me like the light is actually coming full on from perhaps this side. So, because I see some shadows right in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some areas where we have deep, dark shadows. I see some here. And I see some here in this shape, right in here. So let's get that. Again, making interesting abstract shapes. We're not worried about detail right now. We're just using the values, the lightness and the darkness of something. And then all of these tree trunks are very dark verticals. We've got some middle values with this cornfield here. So I'm just going to kind of scrub that in. And again, right here in this cornfield. This is also helping me to define my trees versus my sky. Sometimes with a toned canvas, you get a little, it's easy to get a little mixed up in it. Okay, I think this is going to be our foundation of our painting. We're ready to move on. All right, now for the fun. This is the color. We're going to add the color. And what we call this local color, meaning that it's basically the color of whatever it is we're painting. So, you know, for instance, the sky is blue, and in our case, gray. Or the field is orange. The field is tan. The field is green. That's our local color. So we're going to just kind of put in some local color right now. I like to begin with the sky, or I like to begin if you think of it from top down, or if you think of it from the background into the foreground. So again, working backwards to forwards. So let's go with our sky. The sky is kind of grayed. One of the things I really like to do with a gray, I don't use black in my palette in the painting portion, but I will use it just for convenience to make some grays. Because gray is kind of a funny color. It can actually go in many directions. It could go into a yellow gray, which is very warm, or a blue gray, which is very cool. So as you can see, I'm going to do just kind of a mid-tone gray. And then this particular gray has pinks. I see some areas where it almost has some teal in it too, which is one of my favorite fall combinations of the teals in the sky with the oranges and the warm colors. So I think we'll put a little bit of that. It's kind of a warm sky. All right, so first of all, I'm just going to do right now though this local gray. All right, let's go ahead and just kind of brush that on. It's okay if some of that orange peeks through. It really is great. In fact, I kind of want it to. So right now I'm just scrubbing in that color. I can always come back later and adjust the value of the sky. I'm probably going to need to go lighter, but right now I just want to get it on the canvas. I just kind of want to get it on here. Now, There are plenty of areas where this color comes right down to our horizon line in this row of trees. So I'm just going to kind of pull that in here. I'm putting it in between these tree trunks that you see. We can always come back later and add some or subtract it if we need to. Here's that little square that I told you about that's going to help lighten all of that up. See how much it isn't quite as heavy now? This mass seems to be lighter. I'm going to come in a couple of other spots with this tree.
And I'm also going to come in
and mix some sky holes. Because you want your trees to look like a bird could actually fly into them. You don't want them so solid in such a mass that, unless you're doing a stylized tree and you really kind of are going in that direction. Generally, you want to have some sky holes and some little areas that, that give that tree some air. Okay, let's get back to that local color of our greens now. We're going to start working on the trees. And so this time of year, especially, I've kind of written on some of that so I can't quite see the color. As we're doing greens this time of year, usually they have a lot of red in them. So again, as the leaves are dying, of course, you know, that takes the green out. And I think the next thing that we have is red. So to make a green, going back to our color wheel, we're going to mix together yellow and blue. Now, if we add a lot of blue, it's going to be in a bluish green, and of course, the more yellow we add, or even the more red we might add to it, the more warm that green is going to be. These trees are very warm, so that will be the direction we go. So I'm going to take a big batch of yellow. I'm going to mix in some blue. Got just a good mid-tone basic green. Okay. Now you can see if I were to add more blue over on this side, you get more of a blue-green. That's going to be a great color for down in the foreground where it's very cool. Okay, we'll get to that in just a minute. And then here, where we have more yellow, so more yellow-green. But I will tell you, yellow can sometimes be very cool. So to warm that up, I'm going to add a touch of red. So now you see this green, because I added that red to it, it's more of an olive green. So that's what we're going to go with. Now you can get some really beautiful tones with that. Now, if I were to add white to this color, you can see you're going to get a beautiful tinted green. And adding green to any of these, or adding white rather to any of these, it's going to give you some beautiful tints. If you've not painted before, you might be surprised at the range of color we can get by using just yellow, red, and blue. But that's part of the skill, and that's actually part of the joy of learning how to paint, is to learn to mix color and those surprises and learning how color mixes on a color wheel. All right, so these are some really a nice range of greens that we have to work with now. So let's go ahead and get these on the board. The one on the end here I'm seeing has quite a bit of orange in it. And there's already some of that warm tone under our canvas. So again, I'm just gonna kind of brush it in. It's okay if you go over that really deep dark part. Let's see. Here in the foreground, there's an area that's very gold. I didn't even really notice that. So I'm going to play up that part down here where I have this tint. I'm just going to add just the tiniest bit more yellow to it and a tiny bit more of that red to it. Take it in the direction of a gold. There we go. That's kind of where I want it. All right, let's try that right here. See, it reads as sage to me, and I actually want it to be more golden. Of course, you don't always have to follow exactly what you see on your painting or on your photo, If you come up with a sage green and you like it better, you can run with that. There we go. That's a little more of what I wanted. Okay. And then up here we've got more of these bright greens. I'm adding a little more red to this green, pulling in a little bit of that white. So you can see it makes a very muted, kind of an orangey red. So you see, red and green are opposites on the color wheel. So that's going to bring some punch, some vibration of the colors by putting those together. That's part of the reason that we love fall so much, because so many things that are opposite on the color wheel, some yellows and purples, you see pinks and greens in the trees, some of these oranges and blues with the sky. That's part of the reason that fall is just so vibrant. You get so many combinations of opposites of the color wheel that there's a vibration to the color, the way that your eyes read it. So let's just keep going. We're still continuing to add some greens. I'm gonna go with this mid-tone green. I didn't bother to really wipe off my brush because you can see some of these are really kind of hard to see where it's very defined and where one green starts and the other one stops. And some of these purples that are in here that we put in at the beginning are just really nice. And then back here on the end, that one tree that I'm using kind of as a vertical to take your eye back into the painting. That one has a lot of gold as well. So I'm going to kick that gold up a little bit. I like that gold. I'm kind of putting it at the tops of some of the trees because again, in fall, your trees, sometimes they'll be a completely different color at the bottom as they are at the top where you're getting more sunlight. All right, I've been playing a lot with these trees and we really need to move on. So I am going to wipe my brush off. Actually, I don't need to. Let's go down in here now and work in this. I am going to wipe it off. I want to get a really cool green down here in the bottom, down in where that ditch is located. It's not really getting any sunlight, and the greens that are down there are very lush. They've been closest to the water, so that's the one area where those greens are very vibrant and deep green. So again, I'm going with blue, just a little bit of yellow. I want them to be really in the direction of a blue. So we've got this deep kind of an evergreen looking green. So let's put that down in there. Again, we're just doing some local color, just the basic color that we have. And I'm going to go right over, going over that dark area. When we do our highlights and our details later, we may come back in later and define this a little bit more. But right now, again, we're just doing local color. See a couple areas where I could use that deep green. A couple of areas down here on under the trees that are kind of nice to define that. So now I'm going to go ahead and put in, again, the basic color of that cornfield. There are areas here in the foreground that look very red to me. So I'm just going to kind of put some of that red in because I don't want to lose it. You can see right along here and right along here of that painting, you see red. All right, back to the cornfield. The cornfield is more tan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a touch of yellow to that red. And I'm going to add a pretty good amount of white. And you see when I do that, I get this beautiful tan color that is the color of dried out corn. The color we all know very well here in Indiana. So I'm just, again, going to just define that. I'm not really doing any details on it. I just want to kind of get the shape. There's some areas down in here where there are grasses. So I'm just going to kind of work some of that in there. Again, more grasses in the foreground. Now I'm not quite sure what's happened here with this area, so I need to kind of look at it. I think it actually needs more of these tree trunks, and we can actually start to work on some of the, define some of the trees a little bit. We're getting very close to coming to the highlights, so we're just about to get there. All right, when I'm working on trees and tree trunks, I like to use a script brush. You can use one with really long ferrules. They have a nice spring to them. And there are some that are a little bit shorter, more like a detail brush. Either of these will work. I happen to kind of like the spring that you get with this one. So to mix paint, I'm not going to use that thin brush to mix my paint. I'm coming back to this Workhorse Bright that I'm going to use. So let's go back and get some more of that purple. I want it to be a really nice deep dark value. I may even add a little bit of yellow. If you add a little yellow to this mixture, to this really deep purple, it actually will take it in the direction of black without being a flat black. A lot of times black right out of the tube is very flat. So by mixing that yellow, that purple, adding yellow to it, it gives you a really beautiful, really dark color that on the painting is going to read, it's going to look like black, but in reality it's going to have some vibrancy to it. So that's how I like to do black. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to kind of do some of these. You can see it looks very black, but I'm in fact using purple with a little bit of yellow. Now you can see right here I did something that is just automatic for me. I put 3 little tree trunks right in a row, just like little soldiers. So you can see that it's just something for whatever reason is something that I personally kind of battle, because I know that I do it, I have to be aware of it. So I'm going to do another little tree trunk in there. I'm going to do some, maybe one leaning. When we come in later, we're gonna go with thicker paint and we're gonna do some highlights. So when you're doing a tree trunk, you want to start at the bottom like this, and I'm just wiggling and kind of working my way up and just kind of letting the brush do the work, just kind of pulling it up like that. You want to make sure that you have really good flow with your paint. If you need to add a little bit of liquid to do that. So we're just going to go up, up, up. Now you're going to have areas where there are going to be tree trunks that show. Right now I'm using this black, but we might go into some gray a little bit just to give it some definition. Okay. Now I'm going to go back in and define this just a little bit with that sky color that we had. We used a gray, so I'm going to add a little tiny black with a little white. I will tell you that sometimes these are a little too perfect and I don't really want to see all those little details, because if I were looking at a tree from however far away this is, I probably am not going to see the detail there that we are seeing in this painting. So it's okay, I'm going to kind of mush it up a little bit and take a little bit of water maybe even and just kind of scrub it a little bit. I don't want to really, I kind of want them there, I want to indicate that they're there, but I don't really want to see too much detail. Now let's go back in and we're going to just define some of the spaces that are beneath. Now one thing that I didn't do, that you can't really see on this painting, but I really love doing in my paintings, and they're kind of, my style of painting is kind of known for that, is to have some, off in the distance, I like to have a hill or a tree line to kind of show, to take your eye and lead it back into this area. So to do that, I'm going to be mixing kind of a bluish gray to put back in the way back in the background. blue, take a little red, bring in that purple in, going to add white. I want a little more blue in this. There we are. Kind of a periwinkle blue, actually. So let's do that. We're going to bring it back in here. That actually looks too close to the sky color. It needs to be more defined. I'm going to bring more purple into it. That makes it look like a tree line very far away. Kind of coming down the home stretch, so I'm going to get this detail brush. Now what I'm using here, it's a filbert, which means it has a curved tip, but it's very tiny. This particular one is a number 2. I like using these for details and putting in little bits, like little bits of paint, little pieces of paint to kind of define and show some of the details of the grasses and some of the things like that. When I pick up this brush, that means we're almost finished. We're in a pretty good place right now. This is pretty much where I want the painting to be. I just noticed 2 things, and sometimes it's good if you just take a step back and look at it for a second. I wanted to find this space. I wanted to find that deepest, again, that line that we started with, that foundation. Don't want to lose that, so I'm going to come back in and I'm going to just kind of define that area. With that deepest purple that was almost black, add a little yellow, a little red. Okay, so I'm going to put that in here, and it's got like a little ditch here, and we've got an area here, and some other areas where that is. I'm going to define some of the tree trunks a little bit with that, and I want to define this space. It's going to take our eye back here. There's an area right in here. You can see there are a lot of tree trunks, and in fact it's really hard to kind of see into that area. Yeah, I think that's better as a solid mass. I'm happier with that. One thing that I love to do again in my paintings, I like to set, again, working in details. The second thing that I noticed was that the sky really needs to be defined a little bit more. So going back in with that gray, I'm going to add the tiniest touch of blue, maybe even a little bit of green. Just going to come back in with this color. So you can see I pulled a little green, which makes it in the direction of teal. I did a little blue and with that gray, and I added white. So you can see that how that makes that actually kind of pop now. I like to define that area where the trees are. Same color down in here where we had some of the sky showing through. So this is the spot right here that I want to bring our attention to, this little area. A little too rigid right there, that's going to draw my eye to it. So I'm going to take another brush that I have, and I'm just going to kind of soften that. I'm using acrylic, so it dries really fast, and that was a little too fast. Okay, I have one more thing to do. I'm going to add a couple of little details here and there. This is our focal point, so I want to put some detail around this area. I'm just going back with some of the colors that I already added, that I already had. Namely, what I wanted to start working is in these grasses in the foreground. Again, acrylic dries very fast. Sometimes it's helpful if you put a spray bottle, that you can just kind of spray them from time to time. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do some details, the grasses. I think I want that to be more the color of that corn. So I'm going to go back to that corn color, that tan. There we are. So I added a little more white to it, and as you can see, it kind of defines, it brings your eye into that area. Now, right here at the edge, I'm going to put this highlight, this kind of the place where the light's hitting it. Here, here, and then I'm going to do the same thing right this area being our focal point. I want to draw attention, so what I'm doing is there's this really dark area here. I'm going to put just a little hit in between these tree trunks of this kind of grass look, like that. So it kind of gives the impression that you're looking beyond these trees into the field that's even beyond, that's further out that way, and the light is hitting it. So there's that. I might put a little bit here just to kind of say, oh yep, there's the rest of that field. You might get a peek here, maybe here, there, and you can see now there's a field beyond this row of trees. So that's pretty close. I did have an area of pink up here that I wanted to make sure that we had. I'd forgotten about that. I'm adding a little bit of red to this grass color. I'm just going to kind of push that in a little bit. It isn't so much pink, it's much more tan. So I'm gonna, there we are. Now I'm going to go over it with that blue of the sky that we just did a moment ago. And I will tell you, we are very close to being done. So we're just going to, again, just kind of work that over it. And that, I think, is just about all we need to do. Okay. All right, well, thanks for joining me today. I hope you'll come again and paint along with us sometime again. Bye-bye.